Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with 10 essential string quintets for beginners. Now, we've been doing this series of music I couldn't live without, music you couldn't live without, and you've been contributing absolutely marvelous lists. But a bunch of you have said, after we did string quartets, that we should do string quintets, and I'm happy to do it. However, I don't think it works with quintets I couldn't live without, because it would be very hard to come up with 16 of them, unless you did like all Boccherini. I mean, we could do it, but I like to do a representative sampling. And to be honest, I mean, that you couldn't live without, that you really feel passionate about, I don't know. Maybe some of you could come up with 16, but I can't. And so I wanted to do the list of quintets within the context of a slightly different series, and that's the essentials list for beginners, because I could come up with 10 essential string quintets for beginners very easily. I really think they're essential, and beginners will love them, absolutely adore them. They are gorgeous, but this list, unlike those others, does not admit to additions or subtractions. In other words, if you have a comment, you can comment on what's on the list, but suggest nothing, add nothing, take away nothing. These beginner lists are somewhat didactic, in that, they are what they are. And I don't think it's helpful, if people are starting out, to flood them with a million suggestions for a bazillion different works. That's just me. It's my rules. Sorry, folks. So if you're used to this, you can certainly talk about these works. There are wonderful things to say about them. So let's limit it to that, so I don't have to delete all kinds of stuff. At least I'm asking up front, not that it will matter. Anyway, so 10 essential string quintets for beginners. As a bunch of you have pointed out, one of the joys of quintets is that there are 5 players. And as a result of that, the medium itself has a more relaxed character than string quartets often do. It doesn't have to be as relentlessly contrapuntal, at least in the minds of the composer. And you don't get that sort of forbidding intellectual quality. And the other thing about quintets is that their makeup is not fixed. A quintet can have 2 violins, 2 violas, and a cello, or 2 violins, 1 viola, and 2 cellos, or 2 violins, a viola, a cello, and a double bass even. You've got some freedom in terms of how the ensemble is composed. And so you can listen to it and get a sense of the different kinds of textural combinations that composers employ when they write quintets having different types of instruments. They don't have different numbers. Yes, a quintet with 9 players. There we go. No, different kinds of instruments. You can weight the bass a little more. If you have an extra cello, you may have richer inner harmonies. If you have 2 violas, it's for the listening. So here we go. You ready? Number 1, Boccherini, his string quintet in E major, Opus 11, number 5. I know it sounds terribly uninteresting, but this is the quintet that has the famous Boccherini minuet in it. You've heard it in a million commercials and TV shows and whatnot. Everyone does the minuet. No one does the whole quintet. It's lovely. All of his quintets are lovely, and he wrote billions of them. Bazillions of them. They haven't all been recorded, I don't even think. But this is a particularly lovely one, which isn't so hard to find. Don't get one on period instruments, please. It will just sound awful. Boccherini was a master of juicy string timbres. He was himself a cellist. And you'll note at the end of my list of quintets, I indicate which instrument is the 5th member of the ensemble. In this case, Boccherini wrote for 2 cellos in his quintets. And it's absolutely lovely. And you'll find it maybe with more quintets attached to it. You can enjoy those too. It's a piece everybody should know, complete. Mozart was the king of the quintet. He wrote 6 string quintets, 5 mature ones, and they are his chamber music masterpieces, the greatest things he ever wrote. His quartets are also magnificent, but the quintets particularly, because of that extra richness of texture, he was just able to put that much more loveliness into them and also emotional power, because we've got String Quintet number 3 is in C major. This is one of his largest works in any form, whether chamber or orchestral works. It's a big, bold, juicy hunk of chamber music, full of good tunes. And Mozart uses 2 violas because he likes to have denser harmony in the middle. I mean, some of these pieces were premiered with Haydn and Mozart playing the viola parts. I mean, can you imagine? That's one of my I wish I had been a fly on the wall when they performed these things together, at a dinner party or whatever they did. It must have been amazing. And then the quintet in G minor, Kochel 516. If you like the G minor symphony and you think that has an extra bit of pathos or emotion to it, well, this sucker is positively expressionistic. It's incredibly intense, especially the first movement. In fact, it's so intense that the finale is quite famous. It has an introduction of that. It's just abject tragedy. And then Mozart just gives up and attaches a happy ending because there's nowhere to go after that. It's really a fascinating work emotionally, and brilliant and glorious. Then Beethoven wrote a string quintet in C major, opus 29. He also, like Mozart, has an extra viola. Beethoven's quintet is really attractive, and people pay very little attention to it because Beethoven's quartet writing was so formidable. But this is a very, very attractive work. The interesting thing about it, of course, is that Beethoven didn't write more string quintets because he knew Mozart's. And it really took a while before people had the guts to do more string quintets after Mozart's string quintets. However, Schubert wrote a quintet with an extra cello, which is like the Boccherini's, which is another one of those iconic works. It's one of the immortal, transcendental, stunning glories of chamber music. An incredible piece full of beautiful tunes, of course, and a slow movement, which is the epitome of stasis, of just this sort of rapt tranquility, rapt R-A-P-T, not the other kind. It really, really amazing. Colorful music with pizzicatos and things. It's in the slow movement and a hunting scherzo that's just, oh, wow. It's one of those pieces that people regard as sort of life-changing. And if you're going to start your string quintet collection, you may want to start with the Schubert if you're a beginner, because it's so extraordinary and so personal and expressively potent. So go for it. Mendelssohn wrote 2 string quintets, also like Mozart's, with extra violas, and they are both beautiful works that don't get played. People don't hear them because there are no freestanding string quintet ensembles. The people who play string quartets are always the people who play string quintets there are always string quartets with an extra player. So you occasionally you get a quintet, but they are wonderful, wonderful pieces. This second quintet has a slow movement that's just to die for. It's so deeply and emotionally expressive. It's amazing. And so those 2 quintets are worth hearing, and the second particularly, that's where I'd start. Brahms also wrote 2 extraordinarily beautiful string quintets, like Mozart, with an extra viola. I chose number 1 in F major. Unlike Brahms's string quartets, which can be a little bit clogged up, in his quintets and sextets, he relaxes just enough to let his innate lyricism pour forth in an uninhibited kind of way. And so his string quintets are wonderful works to get to know if you're interested in the finest in chamber music, extraordinary experiences. Bruckner wrote a string quintet. He did, in F major, as his only mature chamber work. And it sounds like Bruckner, amazingly. The thing that's cool about the Bruckner string quintet is that it's only 40 minutes long, or thereabouts. If you're sort of wary of his symphonies because they last forever and they seem to be rather slow and grandiose, and you'd like to hear something that gives you the essence of the composer, that is a really deep, spiritually intense adagio slow movement, and sort of big orchestral climaxes at the end of the outer movements, and a scherzo full of Austrian, folk dance type things. Well, the quintet's a nice place. It's a nice work to get to know Bruckner in a more intimate way. It's not well known. It's not often played. It features, again, an extra viola, and it's really lovely. It's really a lovely work. But there are two quintets by Dvorak that we have to conclude with. The first is his string quintet in G major, opus 77. That is a remarkable work. It has a double bass at the end of it. Now, there's another quintet that's not on here that you may not know. It's Mozart's Eine kleine Nachtmusik. It can be played as a string quintet, as a serenade, because you can do 1, 2 apart. Usually it's played as an orchestral work. And so that would also be a quintet with a double bass. And that tells us, a double bass is an interesting thing when you add it to classical chamber music, because the double bass doesn't usually have much of an independent existence. It most frequently plays with the cello an octave lower, and so gives the music a firm, rich, dark, deep, foundational tone. And for that reason, chamber music with double bass is often considered somehow violating the rule of classical chamber music, which is that each part should be independent and essential and not just follow another one. But that's something that came much later, and it's an intellectual construct. It's not an artistic one. What matters is how well the composer writes for whatever forces he has, right? Schubert's Trout Quintet, the famous Trout Quintet, has a double bass, and it's a more relaxed serenade-like piece. And that's also true of Dvorak's Quintet in G major. It's full of all those great tunes, and it has the extra oomph that you get by having a lower octave on the bottom. So it's definitely worth hearing, especially for its unique orchestration. But Dvorak also wrote his third string quintet. That was his second, by the way, the one with the double bass, in E-flat major, opus 97. It has an extra viola. And this was written at the same time as the American quartet, the famous quartet number 12. And it has the same musical patronage. That is, pentatonic themes, music that's derived from Dvorak's encounter with Negro spirituals and American Indian music. Really, really fascinating stuff. And it's another piece that is just the endless quantity of memorable melody. The second movement is a scherzo that's a real hoedown. It sounds really, really Western American. It's fascinating when Dvorak was in that mode. And so there you have it, a list of 10 essential string quintets for beginners. Go for it. Keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.